introduce Dr. Claire Murphy, who is up front here to talk to you guys a little bit about a program here at SDSU that some of you might be really interested in. So I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Murphy, and then when she's done, we'll be talking a little bit more about intelligence and then development.
Thank you.
There you go.
So I'm very happy to be here today to tell you about a program that that represents a great opportunity for the right person. This program is funded at San Diego State for a particular purpose, and it's really to increase the chances of people getting into graduate school to do research in certain areas. So you're in Psych 101. You know quite a lot about psychology already. You're about to study development, and then you'll study aging. You look at the lifespan. Are you interested in psychology, interested in biology, or social work, or public health? If you're interested in any one of those areas, you're already in the ballpark. We're interested in how our brains change over time. Are you interested in how thinking, planning, and cognition change over time? Are you interested in how personality and behavior change over the lifespan? If any of those things interest you, then this program might actually be an opportunity for you that would change your life. I mean, it's just, it's an opportunity for the right person who would like to go on and become a researcher in one of these areas. The ADAR program is funded by the National Institute on Aging, and you've probably heard about the National Institutes of Health that fund research in this country. They also fund training programs, and that's where the money for this program comes from. It's meant to recruit talented students, talented undergraduates at SDSU. That would be you. It's meant to recruit people who have some disadvantage or are underrepresented. And we are interested in people who have 3 years left at SDSU. And that's because it takes a while to develop the things you need to become attractive to graduate programs. And so those 3 years allow you to develop that. An extremely important part of the program is to work in a laboratory with successful researchers, either at San Diego State or at UCSD. And those people become your mentors. A mentor is a person who guides you, who helps you, who believes in you, who makes sure good things happen for you, and those mentors are part of this program. The training activities include hands-on research in laboratories, either here or at UCSD. You have a research-intensive curriculum, meaning you get all the courses that you need in order to look really attractive to PhD programs. You have special activities, including visiting with researchers who come to San Diego State from other places, finding out how it is they developed their career paths, how they became researchers. You spend 2 summers doing research in laboratories. And for that time, and for 15 hours a week during the school year, you're paid to do that research. So instead of working at McDonald's or Jamba Juice or wherever to have enough money, you're paid to do research in the laboratory. So at the same time as you're earning your life keep, you have the opportunity to develop your resume. So you're working on projects, your name gets on things, and you develop a portfolio of research for graduate school that looks terrific. So you do that for 2 summers here in San Diego, either UCSD or San Diego State. And then 1 summer you go someplace else, somewhere else in the United States, and you work in a laboratory of someone else. And this person then becomes another mentor, maybe a second letter recommendation for graduate school. You have the opportunity to meet other students who are interested in getting a PhD. And you know, you can hang out with party people, or you can hang out with people whose interests are really similar to your own, and sometimes that environment that you create around yourself can make you more successful. And the most important thing here is that you have this faculty mentor to guide you. So who's eligible? Well, somebody who's a full-time student at San Diego State, that would be you. somebody who's talented, has a grade point average of 3.0 or higher. I'm sure that's almost all of you. And then somebody who has some disadvantage or is underrepresented. And somebody who's really interested in obtaining a PhD, somebody who wants to go on in graduate school. Those are the people who are eligible. So the application deadline is coming up soon. It's April the 4th. If you go onto our website, you'll find this website right here. You'll find the application. It's fairly short. It's not terribly detailed, but it gives us a picture of who's interested. And then after we review the applications, then you would come in for an interview and tell us about yourself and why you're interested. And if you have questions, you can stop by the program office or you can call. And this information, the slides, will also be up on Blackboard. Your professor will make sure that that happens. So if you don't happen to have written this down now, you're okay. I passed out some flyers as people were coming in to kind of have them all over the room. So if you're interested, take the flyer. If you're not, pass it to somebody next to you. And if there are people who'd like a flyer and haven't received one, I have some more up here on the table. And I'll leave a few when I leave. So are there any questions? Questions? Well, I hope you all apply. It's a great opportunity. It's the kind of thing that could help you to make it into a PhD program. And if you've talked to people, you know that's hard to do. And we'd like to help you. That's what it's about. So thank you for listening.
My guests always get applause. All right. I was telling Dr. Murphy that my guests always get applause. I don't always get applause, but my guests do. All right, now you're just being silly. All right, so I'm going to play with the lights a little bit and make it a little bit brighter because I tried that in the 8 o'clock section and it seemed to perk them up. So this is my little experimental manipulation that I've got going on. And I just realized that I forgot to fire up a clicker session for you guys. So let me do that with you guys for 9:30. And I want to do a couple of announcements at the beginning, a couple of which are pretty important. So, excuse me as I cough into your face. So let's look at the schedule together here. And I want to make sure that I started the recording too. I did, didn't I? Cool, I did. So today is Tuesday the 22nd. After we do the last little bit of intelligence, we're going to do the first half of development. The big announcement is that there will not be a live online session on Thursday for development part 2. But we will finish up development via that recording. And that means you've got the learning curve quizzes on the development section due on Sunday night, as is typically the case. On the lower left side of Blackboard now, right above my grades, there's a button that says Development Part 2 Lecture. If you click on that guy, it will again, like the recording that we used in Part 2 of the course on sensation, it will jump you into a recording. What I'm going to do this morning is get you to the point that it will naturally feed into the beginning of this recording. So you can view this on Thursday. Again, we won't have a live session at 9:30 because I'm going to be traveling and won't be available to do that. And you can view it then. You can view it before spring break, after spring break, whatever the case might be. But that's the plan for finishing up development. In addition to that, obviously then when we come back after spring break, we'll have class 2 weeks from today where we do emotion, stress, and health. 1 day, 1 chapter's worth of material. The following Thursday, 2 days later, 1 day, 1 online session on personality. So after we do 2 days on development, the rest of this segment of the course here in part 3 is 1 day, 1 chapter. And our next test comes up on Tuesday, the 12th of April. So that's 3 weeks out, but with spring break in between, it's really only 2 weeks out in terms of actual time that we're here. In prepping for the test, what am I going to recommend that you do? I'm going to recommend that you go to supplemental instruction. These are the overall numbers for the two course sections together. So on test 2, people who went to SI got an average of almost a 76 versus those who didn't, about a 71. So we're talking the high end of C versus a C minus. It was interesting, we actually had an even bigger effect in the 8 o'clock class, and I think part of the reason the effect in your class was a little bit smaller was, as I said in the email, you guys did as well as any spring class has ever done on test 2, and so there's a little less room for the SI to push you up if everybody is sort of migrating up. But it's again, my number one recommendation. There are sessions coming up during the remainder of our week this week. So let me just find those for you guys here. I popped this open, so Haley's got a session today, Shyla and Tim as well, and so on through the rest of the week. I have a suspicion that Kristen is going to be very lonely on Friday afternoon at 1:30 on the Friday before spring break. But if you want to make her day, you could show up for her session. The other thing I want to share with you is a video from one of our SI leaders. We do these little tips of the week, and this one is about not giving up. And I love the message of not giving up because I'm a big believer in not giving up. And so even if you, after test 2, are still not thrilled with your performance in the course, it's not time to just throw your hands up and give up and not press on. So let me share with you Haley's video here.
Hi, I'm Haley. I'm a second-year psychology major here at San Diego. This is also my second semester doing supplemental instruction. My tip of the week would be to don't be discouraged if you mess up on any of the tests. This is I actually took the class twice before I became a supplemental instruction leader because I failed the first time. So just know that it's okay if that happens. Just keep trying. Don't give up. Make sure you come to supplemental instruction because it really does help a lot.
To learn more, check out the supplemental instruction button on Blackboard.
Okay, let's do that. All right, so if you're counting, then that means Haley's actually in this course for the 4th time, and she is still alive. So people can survive even the worst of things like that. So again, the message I think is really, really important. Any questions about that? Any of the housekeeping details we need to take care of? Okay, good. So what I want to do just for a couple minutes is circle back to a couple of the big ideas from the end of intelligence. If we get into the development section by 10 o'clock, we'll be in good shape to finish what we need to finish to connect you into the recording that you're going to use for Thursday. I used this slide after introducing issues related to nature versus nurture to lay out for you guys 3 pieces of evidence that would suggest that there is a genetic contribution to intelligence. The first piece of evidence we said was this bar right here, which is the correlation of IQ scores for identical twins who are reared apart. Think about that for a second. They share all of the genes, and because they're reared apart, they share none of the environment, right? This is, I think, the one bullet point if you wanted to convince someone that genes matter for IQ. If you share all the genes with someone, even if you're raised separately, you look very similar in terms of IQ score, positive 0.75. The second bullet point that we talked about that would indicate that genes contribute to intelligence would be comparing bar number 1 with bar number 3. Look at the difference here. This is identical twins reared together versus fraternal twins reared together. So what's the only difference between bar number 1 and bar number 3? Genes, right? These guys here are MZ twins. They're identical twins. These guys here are DZ twins. They share 50% of their genes. This is about positive 0.86. This is about positive 0.60. So that decrease in similarity in IQ scores, correlation of twin 1 scores with twin 2 scores, that decrease is indicative of a genetic contribution, right? Because in both bar number 1 and bar number 3, they're being reared together. The only difference is how genetically similar are they. In the first bar, they share all the genes. In the third bar, they only share 50% of the genes. So any decrease in similarity here, like we're finding, has to be due to genetics, because the environmental piece is the same. Again, they're both being reared together. That was the second piece of evidence that would be suggestive of a genetic contribution. The third and final piece is just the overall pattern here, right? As you look at the pattern of data on the slide, as people become less and less similar, as we move across the slide, their similarities in IQ scores drop as well. Okay, so the less similar you are to someone genetically, the less similar you are to them in terms of your IQ score correlations. So genes matter, but genes are not the whole story. And the way that we can determine the genes are not the whole story is just to look at that identical twins reared apart number again, which is, again, the second bullet point here. If this was entirely genetically driven, then the identical twins correlation should be positive 1.0. It's not. Okay? So there's wiggle room here because it's 0.75 and not 1.0 for environment to exert its influence. And that's what we talked about with this slide here, right? 3 pieces of evidence suggesting, as it says up top here, an environmental contribution to intelligence. Number 1, there's a correlation that's not 0 between the IQ scores of a child and a child's adoptive mother. Think about the logic here, right? If this was something that was entirely genetically driven, that correlation should be 0, right? If intelligence was entirely genetically driven, this would be 0 because why? Because they don't share anything genetically. So any connection we see between their IQ scores has to be attributable to environment because they share none of the genes. Does that make sense? Right? So with all this stuff, the numbers here, the 0.16 are back here on this slide with the 0.86 or 0.75. The numbers are not what's important. What's important is that you understand what these data suggest about what's contributing to IQ. Okay? For environment, number 2 here, it says an impoverished environment leads to a negative correlation between IQ and age. What does that mean? Well, like we said on Thursday, right? The longer you spend in an impoverished environment, the more it drags down your IQ score. That's what negative correlations are about, right? My thumb's going in the opposite direction. So more years in an impoverished environment, and my IQ score is dropping the longer I spend in that impoverished environment. And then finally, the Flynn effect we mentioned on Thursday as a 3-point per decade gradual creep up in IQ scores population-wide. This doesn't mean that you individually are becoming 3 points higher in your IQ score over time. It means in the entire population. So why does this suggest environment? Well, number 1, genes don't change in populations that quickly. And number 2, as we discussed at the end of class on Thursday, there are things that over generations become better for maximizing your intellectual potential. We talked about you versus your grandparents or great-grandparents, and we mentioned things like access to education. You guys always mention technology, right? But healthcare and nutrition. We even mentioned family size. Remember I asked you guys how many siblings did your grandparents have? And people were like 13, 18, 26, right? And it was a very different environment that you grew up in because most of you are not one of 26, okay? I think that was actually the all-time record for grandparent number of siblings. So that's an environmental enhancement in terms of amount of time per child, right? It's basically that's the denominator. How much time do you have per day as a parent to foster intellectual development? Well, it depends on how many kids are present. And if you're one of 3, that's really different from what was going on for your grandmother who might have been one of a dozen. Okay? A very different scenario. So environment matters as well. What I want to leave you with in the section here on intelligence is a model that helps you pull this together. So I'm going to talk about this, and then we're going to do a couple of clicker questions to make sure this is locked in. The model is called the reaction range, and here's what the model suggests. It suggests that you have a genetic anchor. That's what I'm trying to do here, pounding on the palm of my hand. A genetic anchor that is the gift, if you will, from your parents. And that genetic anchor puts you somewhere along the IQ score range. Okay? So you get this genetic gift from your mom or dad. We know that genes contribute, so they're giving you that. And then around that gift, we have about a 20 to 30-ish point range of IQ scores that you could potentially achieve when I give you like a WAIS, a Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale test. Okay? So it's a genetic anchor and then an environmental range where you might slide down or you might slide up the score range depending on the quality of your environment. So if you look on the y-axis here, we're showing the quality of the environment for realizing your intellectual potential. In a deprived environment, you've got almost nothing to foster your intellectual development. In an average environment, you've got some, but not everything that you could have. In an enriched environment, let's say you've got excellent schools, you've got really supportive parents, you've got awesome teachers, you have access to great health care and nutrition, all this kind of stuff. Okay? So what I love about this reaction range model is that we know that both genes and environment contribute to intelligence. This is a model that lets you think about, for individual people, how these things are both at work. Right? So let's look at a couple pairs of people and compare them to each other. Let's look at Tom versus Jack. Okay? It looks like both of them got a pretty similar genetic gift, if you will, from mom and dad, right? Their range where they were anchored, it was about 65 to about 85, right? Pretty darn similar in both cases. But we end up with Tom scoring an 84 on the WAIS, and Jack scored a 66. That's an 18-point difference in favor of Tom. Is that difference due to genes? Is it due to environment? Or are we unable to tell? How many of you guys think that the difference between these two is due to genes? No one. Okay. How many of you think it's due to environment? Okay, almost everyone. Why is it due to environment? What do you see about the genetic anchor that they got? It's pretty much the same, right? So any difference between these guys, those differences have to be due to those environmental factors. So again, we go back to things like what was school like, what kinds of books did Tom have at home. Jack, maybe he had like a rock and a stick, and that was it. That's all he had for realizing his, I'm sorry, I shouldn't giggle, but his intellectual potential. That was it, right? So environment is driving the differences here. Let's pick another pair. Let's pick Alice. That was like 3D. That was awesome. Versus Jack. Oh, and it bounced in. If you didn't see it, let's watch the replay. Let's compare these two. Okay, I made this slide on a flight back from Chicago. I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I was just goofing around with PowerPoint. I know some of you want to compare Jack and Jill and say they went up a hill and took a WAIS, but we're not going to do that. Jack versus Alice. Jack's got a 66. Alice is almost 60 points higher at 125. So are differences between them due to genes, environment, or we don't know? How many people think it's due to genes? How many people think it's due to environment? It's not environment. Why is it not environment? They're in the same environment. So the difference is there. Watch this again, flight from Chicago. The differences there have got to be due to genetic factors, right? Because the environment is basically controlled. They're in the same deprived environment with just the rock and the stick, and Alice has got a 125 and Jack's got a 66. So the way that we would explain this, without, you can start sounding like Hitler right away when you start saying this. Alice got a better genetic gift than did Jack, right? Alice was more selective in choosing her parents than Jack was. Obviously, they didn't pick their parents. Okay? So that's the story there. Again, what I love about this model is you're not thinking like, oh, it's all genes or, oh, it's all environment. These things are operative for all these people, right? What do you notice about all the people in the deprived environment? Where do they score within their range? On the low end. How about these guys in the enriched environment? On the high end. Okay? And it's not true that everybody in a deprived environment ends up with a lower IQ score than everybody in the enriched. Right? Alice is way outperforming Tom. Why? Well, if you compare Alice and Tom, that's because she got that genetic anchor that was way higher up on the end of the range here, right? And in fact, if we took her and put her in an enriched environment, what might that score end up being? It looks like it could go like 140 something, a humongous score, right? like 3 standard deviations out from the mean, that's a crazy high score. All right? Questions about the reaction range idea. So take-home message is it's a 20 to 30 point range where you have that genetic anchor that puts you maybe between 90 and, I don't know, 110, 115. And then depending on the quality of the environment, you're either going to slide up or slide down within that range based on those factors. Okay? So it's not genes or environment, it's both. All right, this first clicker question, I know we did online, but I want to do it again. Oh, and I want to remind you about channel AA. For some reason, like last week or 2 weeks ago, we had people on the wrong channel. So it's AA, power button, hold it, and then press AA. And you know that if your response is recorded, it gives you a little check mark on the clicker as well. All right, so let me start this guy up. Correlations between the IQ scores of identical twins reared together are higher than the correlations between IQ scores of identical twins reared apart. This finding suggests that what is influencing IQ scores? Genes, environment, gender, or bacon intake? Bacon is clearly a theme in this course. The 2 big themes are nature versus nurture and bacon. That's what we learn about. Even though now they tell us it kills us, whatever. Breathing kills you, eating, drinking, whatever. Everything kills you. All right. We'll let this run out. If I remember correctly, you guys did pretty well with this in the online session too, so I'm expecting good results, and I got them. So that's environment because why? Because we're comparing identical together versus identical apart. Okay, good. How about this one? This is one of my favorite questions of the semester. It can be inferred from twin studies that differences between what kinds of twins are most likely the product of what kinds of factors. Take a look at that and try to come up with a good answer. And then after we're done with this question, we'll actually be done with the whole section on intelligence. It'll be good. 45 minutes will get us through the first part of development. All right. Let's take a look. Uh-oh. That's a little bit messy. So what did we get here? We got half of you saying that differences between, for choice B here, differences between MZ twins are most likely the product of environmental factors. And then more than a quarter of you actually thought the opposite. The differences between MZ twins are mostly the product of genetic factors. All right, I want to make sure you guys get maximum points here. So let's take a minute and do a peer instruction interaction here where you talk to the folks around you, try to come up with the right answer together, and I'll walk around and listen in for a minute. All right. Let's do it a second time. And I listened in to a couple conversations back there. I'm just going to let this run down to like 30 seconds or so, so chime in a little more quickly, because I want to save us a minute or two to get through development. Heard some pretty good explanations back there. Let's see what you guys did the second time. All right, 5 more seconds and I'm going to stop it. Everybody good? Anybody need another second? Okay. Let me stop it. Show the results. Wow. We're at almost 90 again. That happens all the time with these questions when we do that. Look at B and D. What are they? They're opposites again. So go back to that strategy for the test questions. If you've got two choices that are opposites, probably one of them is right. Why is it B? Somebody tell me in their own words. Raise a hand and tell me why differences between MZ twins are most likely the product of environmental factors. Yeah. They got the same exact genes, so the differences can't be due to genetic factors, because why? They're the same. The genes are the same. So the genes are equal, so any differences between them must be attributable to those environmental factors. That's exactly right. And we had people, explain it in similar words as I walked around and listened in. Any questions as to why that is choice B? That's what I want you to understand, right? Notice that neither of those multiple choice clicker questions was like, what's the right number here, right? It's about the logic and thinking about these kinds of twin and adoption studies that's important. That's what I'll ask you to do when we have test questions on this stuff. All right? Cool. Let's start talking about development. So let me jump out of this one and jump into the development slides for you. And what I've got for you is a little outline of how we're going to work our way through this. So we've got 6 major sections. We're going to do the first one in a little bit. The thing up top was high tech when I started teaching in 2000, and I just can't delete it. I just feel so beholden to it. As we watch this person develop, I just can't stop having it in there. Here's our focus this morning. Cognitive development, which is a fancy way of saying, how does thinking change over time? And our focus is going to be on childhood, right? Looking at changes in the thinking of 3-year-olds versus 10-year-olds versus, say, 16-year-olds. By the time we finish, we'll dip our toe very briefly into language. I got to introduce phonemes versus morphemes. If you've ever had a linguistics class, you'll know what that's about. If we get through those slides, then what you watch in the video for Thursday, we'll just pick up right from where I left off there. In that recording that's available on Blackboard, there's a social development section where we talk a lot about attachment. And we look at styles of attachment. We look at ways of measuring attachment via something called the strange situation test. We talk about factors that influence attachment. Then a little brief section on adolescence and adulthood, and then a super awesome pick-me-up right before spring break in that recording on death and dying. It's always like a nice way to launch yourself in a spring break is talk about dying. Okay, so again, basically from language down is in that recording. The cognitive piece is the most significant chunk of the material here. I want to do it together with you in this class today, and then, as I said, get started a little bit into the language section. The major thrust of the language section, by the way, is going to be about nature versus nurture as it relates to language development. So do babies learn how to speak language because they're wired to do it? It's built in. Is it environmentally driven? Is it some kind of combination of that? That's what's covered a lot in the beginning of that recording that you guys are going to do. I'm going to skip this, and we're going to come back to it in a bit. I'm going to skip this to get to where we need to get to. And I'm going to start with this slide where I'm going to introduce the model that's our focus for like the next 30 minutes straight. It's called Piaget's stage model of cognitive development. Piaget is Jean Piaget. He is a Swiss physician, which is kind of tricky to say. He's a Swiss doctor. And based on his observations actually of his own children, he first mapped out this model. And then obviously because he was a scientist, he knew that he needed to show that these findings and observations from his own kids would generalize and be applicable to other children. And they've largely been found to be true. Okay, there are some minor modifications that if you take a developmental psych course, they'll sort of work on the edges of what we cover here in a basic way in intro. So the 4 stages are the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. And if you look at it, it basically sort of adheres to toddlerhood, about 0 to about 2. Okay? Your preschool years, up age 7, you're probably going into first grade. Okay? 7 to 11 is about first grade to about 5th grade. And then beyond that, we're into the formal operational stage. Okay? Here's your job. Your job is going to be to know the major achievements of each of these stages and what distinguishes what goes on at one stage from what's going on at some of those earlier stages, right? So what emerges here that you didn't see before, right? What are the major achievements is another way to think about it. Now, before we get into this, I need to remind you, first of all, that these are approximations, right? It's not like you wake up on your 7th birthday and you're like, yes, I'm finally in the concrete operational stage. So it's approximate, right? Around that time is when you get there. And around 11 is when you get to formal. So don't obsess over these specific ages. None of the test questions, these guys will tell you, the SI leaders, you know, we're not going to ask you a test question, what's the exact age range of this? Because they're all approximations. Okay, it's more important that you understand the big ideas of what goes on within each. Here's the deal. To get to the point where we could talk about these stages a little more thoroughly, I need to introduce on the next slide 3 related ideas that are especially relevant for these first couple of stages in particular. So let me introduce first of all the idea of schemas. Okay? Schemas are mental patterns, they're ways of thinking that children form at different stages of development. Okay? I think about schemas as an organizational framework. Okay? An organizational framework for understanding things that are going in the world, things that are going on in the world. It's a way to sort things and make sense of things. I sort of use the computer analogy in my mind that your schemas almost function like folders might for you on your computer and how you keep things organized, right? So each of the 4 stages is characterized by a new and newly emerging set of schemas as we go forward developmentally. So these are organizational frameworks or systems for making sense of what's going on in the world. Let me give you a concrete example, and it's the one I always run with because it works really well. One organizational framework that you might have, one schema that you might have as a youngster is about animals. Okay, little kids are really into animals, and maybe the very beginning of the rudimentary organizational framework that you have in your schemas is about dogs. Okay, and in your mind, without being this explicit about it, as a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, you understand that 4-legged furry animals are dogs. Okay? That's your schema, that's your folder, that's your system here. Okay. So you've got this system for understanding the world. It says 4-legged furry animals are dogs, and you've got a dog, and one of your neighbors has a dog, and when you go visit grandma, she's got a dog. Cool. Okay. Now your family does a trip during the summer to visit some relatives who live in Iowa. So this is cool. We're going to Iowa. We fly there, drive around, go visit our cousins. They have a dog. 4-legged furry animal is a dog. Awesome. Well, what we just described is a situation where new experiences can be dropped into what you've already laid out in your organizational framework, in your schema. We call that process, when new things fit, assimilation. So it says here, assimilation is the process through which a new experience is placed into an existing schema. It's called assimilation. So the mnemonic device here is that assimilation after the A has 2 S's. That should remind you that the schema stays the same with assimilation. Okay? So something that we newly encounter can be dealt with what we've already laid out in our minds. Okay? So the dog that we encounter in Iowa is like the dog I encountered at Grandma's house and at my neighbor's house, four-legged furry animal dog. Awesome. Got it. Okay. Now, when we're visiting in Iowa, just down the street there's a farm. And we go to that farm and there's a sheep. And I encounter the sheep, and what do I say that it is? It's a dog. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. That's not a dog. That's a sheep. Well, that experience is going to make me refine in some way my schema, right? My organizational framework, my system here of folders needs to be tweaked, right? If you imagine that I'm working during the summer and prepping my syllabus for the fall, on my computer, I don't have a fall 2016 folder yet. We're not there. But if I start making that syllabus, oh, damn, I got to get that set up, right? So I can drop this new document into that folder. What we're describing there is now called accommodation. Where we encounter the sheep, or we encounter the fall 2016 syllabus, and we've got nowhere to put it. And what we need to do is adapt or expand or change or modify the schema. Okay? So accommodation with two C's, and the schema changing, change begins with C. That's another mnemonic device here for this part of it. Okay? So now something has to be changed. So when I ask you a test question, notice I didn't say if, when I ask you a test question about schemas, assimilation, and accommodation, if the example is accommodation, it's going to have a verb that is a synonym of change. Bless you. Okay? It's going to say change, it's going to say alter, modify, tweak. I don't know what other verbs you can look up, you know, on your computer with your thesaurus tool, but that's what you're going to be looking for, right? If I modify it or alter the schema in some way, then it's an accommodation example. So with that situation where you encounter the sheep and you first call it a dog, what you need to do is refine what you've got. You've got to not only refine the dog category and say four-legged furry animals that bark are dogs. We didn't have the that bark part, right? Now you need a new category that says four-legged furry animals that go bat are sheep. That was nice. I made a good sheep sound. Okay? We've got two different categories now, right? Now things have changed and we've altered this situation to be able to better make sense of it. Okay? Does that make sense? How many of you guys have ever been to the San Diego Zoo? How many of you guys have ever seen the okapi at the San Diego Zoo? What the hell is that thing? Right? I mean, you talk about a perfect example that calls for accommodation. You look at it and like, I think a zebra had sex with a giraffe or something, right? Because it's this thing that looks kind of like, half like a zebra, right? You know what I'm talking about? The brown thing has got kind of a longish neck like a giraffe, but it's got some stripes on the ass end, and I don't know what to do with that, right? So that calls for accommodation. How many guys were sort of freaked out by that when you first encountered it? I came from like Philadelphia with like a regular zoo where we don't have funky animals. They're like, what is that? Right? Who got together and created that one? That's enough about that. Questions about assimilation versus accommodation. Let me give you another concrete example before I ask you a clicker question in a minute. Let's say you have a youngster who has, you had them using a little plastic spoon to help them eat. You know, they're doing it by themselves and they're starting to learn how to do that. 2, 3 years old, whatever they're doing. And you give them an upgrade from the spoon to a fork. Okay? If they are assimilating their use of the fork, what are they going to do with the fork? How are they going to use it? I see you doing that. They're going to scoop like you do with a spoon. So that's assimilation. Using a fork like you use a spoon will be assimilation. Now you might show them, hey, you know, you got this little piece of steak there. Instead of scooping it, what might you want to do with it? You might want to do this, right? So now you can stab down with a fork and pick that thing up. Now we're talking about accommodating, right? That schema for, I guess, kitchen utensils, right? This thing can be used in a slightly different way. Okay, so I've talked about okapis, forks, and steaks. Good, we're covering all this real well. Here's the example. I love this one from the old textbook. 2-year-old Alexandra has learned the schema for doggy from her picture books. Awesome. She sees a cat, she calls it a doggy. What is wrong with her? Come on. Right? No, what she's trying to do is assimilate the new animal into the existing schema. Her mom tells her, no, it's a cat. And now she accommodates her schema for four-legged furry animals. Dogs are not the same as cats. And over time, the schemas get more and more sophisticated, and she distinguishes different pets, maybe different breeds of dogs. She goes to the zoo and she sees an okapi. What do I do with that, Mom? Right? Okay, and we ultimately figure this stuff out over time. Questions about assimilation or accommodation or just the overall idea of a schema. Make sense? Okay, I don't see any hands. Good. How about this clicker question? Another question with a bunch of cats on it. We had the cat with the green light getting his paw shocked. There's all kinds of weird cat pictures in here too. 3-year-old Sarah calls all four-legged animals kitties. Her tendency to fit all four-legged animals into her existing conception of a kitten illustrates what? That's actually another way to think about a schema, an existing conception or a conception of things. That's the deal. Oh, by the way, 2 of these things I haven't even talked about yet. So that should make it a little bit easier. All right, we're good. Oh my goodness, this might be a world record here. Oh, so close to getting everybody. Yeah, that's assimilation because the schema is staying the same. All right, here we go. A review of the 4 major stages from Piaget's model begins with the sensory motor stage. So we begin with the sensory motor stage where kids are experiencing the world through their senses and through the actions that they take towards the world around them. Okay? If we piggyback this on intelligence, which we just finished talking about, their intelligence, broadly defined, would consist of motor actions, that is, doing things, towards objects in their environment, and then some kind of sensory feedback from those actions. The phrase I always think of when I see this sort of pushing on things or turning things or shaking things, etc., is this is really why lots of toys for really little ones are noisy toys, aren't they? Have you ever noticed that the toys you get for newborns, almost all of them make some kind of noise or do something like that, or you press a button and Elmo pops up and starts singing la 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 la, right? Things like that. Because that's the way they learn, right? That's how their intellectual development is going to commence, by being little experimenters, right? Trial and error, doing things and seeing what happens in the aftermath of doing that, right? So one of the things you'll see is, they're maybe still sitting in their high chair. You'll see them, you start giving them some food, and they're feeding themselves little bits and pieces, and they might grab something and reach out to the side and drop it. Why are they doing that? Just to piss you off? Just to make a mess? No, what are they learning about? When you drop something, what do you learn about? Gravity. Now, they're not going to say to you, hey, watch this, 9.8 meters per second squared. Boom. See it? Did you measure it? You want to get the iPad out and shoot a video and we can run it through and check the time? No, we're not going to do all that. But that's the idea, right? It's about trial and error. It's about experimenting and doing things and seeing what happens. Their sucking reflex goes through the processes of both assimilation and accommodation. If you didn't know, newborns are born with a whole host of different reflexes. They have a rooting reflex, which is not about like cheering on your favorite team, but it's about when you stroke their cheek, they turn to the side where you're stroking them and they start sucking. They have an incredibly strong grasp reflex. You guys ever seen this? Like you stick your finger in there, it's going to start turning purple on the end because they're going to grab so damn hard. In fact, that is so strong, that grasp reflex, I'm not recommending that you do this, but it's so strong that if you got them grasping on both, you could like lift them up. You could do like baby curls. But don't do that, because if you drop them, that's not good. Plus, their head doesn't work right. It's like just... So, but that's another reflex. But the sucking reflex, here's the deal. They go from nursing to drinking from a bottle. That's assimilation, right? The sucking from nursing works for the sucking from the bottle. We're good to go. But now if we move from that sucking reflex and we try to map it onto drinking from like a big boy or a big girl cup, you can't do it, right? You get this cup, you're like just sucking on the edge, and dude, nothing's happening. What should I do? What you should do is change your schema, right? And you have to do something different now regarding this drinking thing. It's not just on sucking on everything in sight. All right, here's the biggie. The big emerging capacity during the sensory motor stage is object permanence. Right around 9 months of age, it's approximate, so it doesn't mean they're not going to get into Harvard if they achieve object permanence at like 11 months. Who cares? Somewhere around that time, right? What's going to happen here is they're going to understand that things continue to exist even when they can't see them. Okay? Things continue to exist even when I can't see them. Major accomplishment of the sensory motor stage. It relates obviously to something that moms especially, but dads too, experience with their youngsters, which is known as separation anxiety. You guys ever seen this? What happens when mom leaves? What does the baby do? They start crying, right? Mom's like, I just want to get a shower. I just want to eat a meal. No, if you are out of sight, what's the deal here? Before you achieve object permanence, you know the expression out of sight, out of mind? Before object permanence occurs, it's out of sight, out of existence. When something is not seen, it doesn't exist any longer. Okay? So it's a major accomplishment to be able to, achieve something like this. Look how excited this little guy is. He's got his favorite little sheep here, little lamb. You put the diaper cloth on top of it. He knows where it is. I got this. Boom. Right? Pick it up. Ta-da. Right? If he hadn't achieved object permanence and you did this, you know what's going to happen here at this point? He's like, okay, what's next? Because if it's hidden, it no longer exists. In fact, we've got a later slide where we summarize this stage theory, and it's the same little baby, and he's sitting in a high chair, and his favorite little stuffed animal's in front of him, but they drop in like a piece of wood, so he can't see it anymore, and he's turned like this way. Like, all right, what do I do now? Because that thing doesn't exist anymore, right? So again, connecting it with separation anxiety, because if mom and dad leave simultaneously, what has happened to that youngster who hasn't achieved object permanence yet? When your mom and dad go in another room, you know what has just happened? You have become an orphan. I almost poked Ann right in the eye. Okay? So that's a big, big thing to be able to achieve this. What's the game you play with babies that is related to this? Peekaboo, right? Like, I can't play peekaboo with you guys. Like, don't exist, right? Don't exist. It's just not as funny. But man, if you haven't gotten to this point yet, that is hilarious, right? Like, because you're there and then you're not. How are you doing that? Okay, there's got to be an app for that. All right, pre-operational stage. Now we're talking preschool, kind of kindergarten, getting into first grade here. Here's what's going on. They're representing things with words and images. They've got language development going on that is just amazing. Because, by the time they get to first grade, like, you could go to lunch with them and they could tell you like all the stuff that happened during the day. And you're thinking like it feels like 3 weeks ago you were a blob. And you just slept and pooped and ate, and that was just about it. And now like you're a person and I can talk to you. It's really amazing. But they're not particularly logical. If you try to reason with a 5-year-old, you're in for it, right? Everything is based on immediate appearance, not any kind of logical reasoning. They can do symbolic representations of things. They could do pretend play, and I would argue that the pretend play is contingent on that language development, isn't it? You can't really have a rich pretend play experience if you've only got like 2 words, right? So we're going to pretend to be a family, or you're going to be the teacher and I'm going to be the student, or I guess you can't play cops and robbers anymore, but pretend that you could. We're going to do cops and robbers, whatever it is. and you're going to use language to do that kind of pretend play. The major limitation that persists here is not only with respect to the lack of logical thinking, but it's also with respect to social thinking. And they've got this egocentrism that, in terms of social thinking, really represents a problem with what I would call perspective taking. What they struggle with, and what's a major challenge for them, is being able to see things from another person's point of view. Okay? So little Johnny has come over to play with your little guy, and your little guy doesn't want to share his favorite truck with little Johnny, right? And you say to him, well, how do you think Johnny feels, that when you're not sharing your truck? I don't know, I'm not Johnny, right? I can't do it. So can't you put yourself in his shoes? No, he has really small feet. I cannot fit in his shoes, right? So they're going to struggle with that sort of like, you really want them to be empathetic, right? You can't be empathetic when you're like 3. Okay? It's difficult to do that because you've got these cognitive limitations. And what you're going to read about in the textbook in this regard is, again, this egocentrism isn't so much like, with teenagers where they think the world revolves around them. It's this limitation of being able to see things from other people's perspective. And what you're going to see is a demonstration of this thing called the 3 mountain task. 3 mountain task, which is a task where literally what happens is they come in to the research lab and they're sat down at a table where in front of them there are 3 piles of clay that are made to look like mountains. In fact, let me just jump down and show you that slide. Where the hell is it? It's blah, 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 this one. Let me just jump to this, and then I'll jump back. Here's the 3 mountain task. So you come in, and you're seated, let's say, at position A right here. Okay, you're seated at A. And you've got a tiny mountain on the right, a medium-sized mountain on the left, and in the middle and the back there's a giant mountain. Okay? With the 3 mountain task, what you're asked to do is, don't tell me what the mountains look like from where you're sitting at A, but tell me what they look like from position C. And to make it really concrete, you might have, with real little ones, you might have like a little Elmo doll sitting over there. So what do the mountains look like from where Elmo sits? Okay? At the beginning, they won't, when they're really little, they won't even understand what you're asking them. Right? And it will take a while before they can reliably, basically, mentally put themselves in that position and say, okay, well, if it was medium, small, big, from the other side, it's going to be big, small, medium. Right? It's going to be flipped. They won't even understand the question on the front end, and it takes probably until the end of the stage, about 7, first grade-ish, until they can consistently be able to handle that. So that's the egocentrism. Does that make sense? So it's not about the world revolves around me. It's I have a hard time in my social thinking sort of understanding another person's point of view. That's probably the best way to describe it. Okay? All right. Any questions on that at all? All right, good. What about the concrete operational stage? They're getting more advanced. They're now able to think logically about concrete things. That's why it's called the concrete operational stage. So they still can't do particularly well with abstract scenarios, what-if scenarios, as much as they'll be able to do when they get to the formal operational stage, right? So with formal operational stage kids, I don't know, we just watched that, what's it called, The Man in the High Castle show that was on Amazon. It was a really cool show about what if Germany and Japan won World War II. And what we know as the U.S. Was controlled on the eastern coast by Germany, on the west coast by Japan. What would life be like? Like my teenager loved that. He's all into U.S. history and thought this was fascinating. If you had a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, or now at this stage a 7-year-old, right? The 7-year-old is going to say, well, but that didn't happen. And that's like the end of the discussion, right? You can't really go further with it. But this is what I'm trying to get at, right? It's got to be something concrete. Concrete analogies, they can handle these, right? So if you had the analogy that said cat is to animal as rose is to flower, right? A cat is a type of animal. A rose is a type of flower. They'd get that because that's concrete. There's no symbolic representation or anything like that. if instead the analogy was something like dove is to war as blank is to peace. Dove is a symbol of war. What's symbol? Dove is symbol of peace, I should say. Did I do it backwards? Dove is, okay, sorry. It's 2.5 hours straight that I have to do this. Dove is to peace as blank is to war. Then it would be hawk, right? Something is representing something else. They can't handle those as well. Their arithmetical operations are just fine. So you give them a series of math problems and they'll just crank these guys out, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. They're doing fractions by the time they're in the end of the stage in 4th or 5th grade. What's challenging for them, though, is something like this. If you gave them a series of problems like this, and yeah, they solve them. They get them right. 2 plus 1 is 3, and I got 6 plus 1 is 7. Yeah, I know 8 plus 1 is 9. If you said, okay, what I want you to do is step back and tell me the general principle that is exemplified by those specific questions. You're like, what? Well, the general principle is that if you take an even number and add 1, what kind of a number do you always get? An odd number. They might not be able to do that stuff. Do you see how that's different? It's not the concrete sort of, grunt work of using the skills in arithmetic. It's a little bit more challenging. It's a little bit higher level, and they might struggle with that. So, like object permanence was for the sensory motor stage, we've got conservation as the major achievement here in the concrete operational stage, stage 3. The big word here is reversibility. Okay, so reversibility refers to the fact that an action might be reversible. I don't like this idea that an action is reversible because not all actions are reversible, right? If you throw a glass on the ground and it breaks, that's not reversible. If you set the curtains on fire, that's not reversible. Okay? But some things are, and we start with simple things like the reversibility with respect to things like counting things and number. So one of the first abilities that they show in terms of conservation is conservation of number. Let's say that I've got these 4. They're not going to be X's in the real world. They'll be pennies or buttons or whatever. Show these 2 rows to a child and I say, does row 1 have more? Does row 2 have more? Or do they have the same amount? And they say, they've got the same amount. You're like, okay, just watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to do something here. Now, does row 1 have more? Does row 2 have more? Or do they have the same amount? Okay. If they have achieved conservation, mentally or physically, what can they do with those 4 objects? Just push them back together. And they'll say they have the same amount. Okay, they might not even push them back together, and they might just count them and say there's 4 up top, there's still 4 down the bottom, so there's the same amount. That's number. That's the first type of conservation they typically achieve. Here's liquid volume. This is an interesting one, right? So I show this little girl 2 glasses of milk. I say, okay, I don't like drinking out of these short, fat glasses. I like tall, skinny glasses. Let me pour this one into a tall, skinny glass. But before I do that, I've asked her, does this one have more? Does that one have more? Do they have the same amount? She says, well, obviously they have the same amount. Okay, cool. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to pour it in. Now I'm going to ask you which one has more. And she says the tall, skinny one. What? Why would she say that? Well, she hasn't achieved conservation, and what is she being tricked by? It's higher, right? She's looking at the one that has the highest liquid level. What is she ignoring? The width of the container, right? So there's nothing wrong with her. She just hasn't achieved liquid conservation yet. You could go beyond liquid conservation. You could do mass. So here's mass. You've got 2 pounds of clay. You take one and you roll it out like a big giant hot dog and say which one has more. They might say this one before they've achieved conservation. Okay? You can use a child's lack of conservation skills to your advantage if you need to. So if you're at a birthday party and, I don't know, let's say you were tasked with taking your little nephew, and he's all upset because little Johnny, he got a bigger piece of birthday cake. Look, Johnny's birthday cake is this big, and mine is not as big. And you're like, I know this dude doesn't know conservation, and I paid attention in Lemaica's class. Hold on there for a second, Mr. Nephew. I turn my back to him. I cut his piece in half. I turn back around. I'm like, now you have 2 pieces, and Johnny's only got 1. Boom. Drop the mic, walk away. You've solved the problem. right? Because he doesn't understand conservation, right? 2 is more than 1. It's the same piece and it's still smaller, but 2 is more than 1. That's what he's struggling with. Right, this would be like if your friend, you don't have any friends who haven't achieved conservation, but if you did, it would be kind of funny because you could order 2 large pizzas from Papa John's, one's cut into 8 pieces and the other cut into 16. They're like, I don't know how we're going to eat all 16 pieces. We can eat 8. We can't eat 16. Right, it's the same, right? It's about, you get the idea. I don't need to beat that in the ground. All right, final stage, formal operational stage. We have 10 minutes, so hang in there. In the formal operational stage, we're freed up from the here and now, and I can do abstract reasoning, and I can do abstract logic. I just think about this as the what-if stage, right? Like I referred to earlier. You can imagine, like, what if things in history didn't turn out the way that they did? What implications might there be for the way you live your life? Okay? Really interesting things you could do in terms of those what-if scenarios. You can form hypotheses and test them through deductive logic. So obviously what happens here in school is you can do more interesting projects related to science. Okay? You might be doing something that's basically physics, right? You're not teaching them F equals ma, but you ask them, like, what if we took the mass of this object and made it a lot bigger or made it a lot smaller? How hard would you have to push on it to make it move? If it was bigger, if it was smaller, what would happen? Things like that, right? You can move to those levels. In school, you can include things like algebra and things regarding the scientific method. So the algebra piece, right? You can give probably a 5th, 6th grader pretty easily nowadays algebra problems. And you could say, you know, I don't know, 3x minus 7 equals, we'll make it come out even, 17. Okay? If you give that to a 1st grader, you know, somebody's 6 years old, Dad, I got math homework where the teacher said 3x minus 7. I think she lost her mind because there's letters in there, Dad. I'm really worried about the x. What do I do with that? Okay? They don't understand this represents an unknown number. They don't understand you can add 7 to both sides, and then after you do that, you've got 3x equals 24, and you can divide both sides by 3, and then you get x by itself, and you get 24 divided by 3. Oh, it's 8. That comes later, right? And so I practice actually that problem to make sure I can do it right for you guys. So that's a major accomplishment here. The thing I want to have you make a note about, because I don't really talk about it, but it's important, is moral development. And on moral development, you're going to read in a textbook about a theory from a guy named Kohlberg. So just make a note of this and make sure you're reading this in a textbook, because it's probably something where I'll ask you a little textbook question about it. Kohlberg's theory is about how our sense of morality changes over time, and how we move away from things like, you know, just basic, you know, punishments to higher levels of being able to think about the shades of gray in different scenarios. So the example that's often thrown around with Kohlberg is a scenario where you say there's a man whose wife is really, really sick. There's a medication that would save her life, but he can't afford it. Is it okay for him to steal the medication? Okay? 6-year-old is probably going to say if you steal it, they're going to arrest you and put handcuffs on you. Okay? Very concrete, right? I saw it on Cops one time, right? The 15-year-old is probably going to say, well, stealing, we know stealing in general is not right, but somehow that's less bad than like stealing a candy bar just for the hell of it, right? You're saving your wife's life. She could be a scientist who could come up with a cure for that disease and some other disease and save a bunch of lives. So that stealing there feels, right? So it's a different depth of understanding of those kinds of scenarios. Again, the what-if piece is key for the kids in this formal operational stage. We're not done. I got to get into a little bit on language, so hang in there. This is a nice summary of what's going on at sensory motor, pre-operational, and concrete operational stages. That's right from one of your infographics in the book. I mentioned this one earlier, the 3 mountain task. Here's the little guy who has, it's the same baby, right? He's actually wearing the same damn outfit. His favorite stuffed animal dog is right there. And then we drop this board in, and the kid's like, okay, what's next? Okay, he doesn't go looking around for it because he hasn't achieved object permanence yet. There's the conservation example. Here's this third eye. This is a weird thing. Like every time I see this eye in the hand. I'm like, what is that, right? It's about a what-if scenario. If you had a third eye, where would you put it? You're going to get more interesting placements and explanations why from 14-year-olds than you will from 4-year-olds, right? 4-year-old might be like, I put it right in the middle because then they'd all be lined up, right? Something really basic. The teenager might say, in your hand, because you could use it to look backwards. And if you were in a crowd and you couldn't see, what could you do? Boom. I'm raising my hand and I'm looking around. I got like a built-in periscope right here. Here it is, okay? So that's, again, a what-if kind of scenario that you could see more going on with that in the formal operational stage. All right, a clicker question and then 2 minutes of language. We're only taking 30 seconds for this question, so chime in right away. All right, 5 more seconds, guys. And don't slam around, just give me my last 4 minutes here, all right? All right, here we go. This was easy and you guys nailed it. That was a question I was going to ask at the beginning, but I just skipped over because of time constraints. So we'll move beyond that. 2 points on this slide. The building blocks of language include phonemes and morphemes. You're going to need to know this because I build on this in the online recording that you're going to watch. The most basic unit of sound in a language is called the phoneme. It's from the root P-H-O-N, which means sound. We have 26 letters in the English alphabet that ultimately yield something like 40 phonemes. Okay, so this is not a linguistics class, but I want to give you the basic building blocks of language here. Okay, in addition to sound-based building blocks, we have meaning-based building blocks, and the morpheme, not morphine, but morpheme, is the most basic unit of language that carries meaning. So what I like to do with this is I like to give you a test question where I give you a word and I say, how many morphemes are in that word? And I always start this discussion with the word players. How many morphemes do you think there are in the word players? How many building blocks around meaning? Anybody want to guess? 1? 2? 3? I see more hands for 3. It's 3. What is it? More than one person who engages in some kind of sport or activity. Somebody just died on the skateboard. Okay. Players, just going right down the side hallway. Ex-wives is another favorite example of mine because it sounds like the beginning of a country song. Okay. Ex-wives. How many morphemes here? Well, it's plural. And you got this prefix, so there's more than one woman I'm married to, but not any longer. Okay, so you check them off there. You got 3 morphemes there as well. Final slide is this one, hierarchical structure of language, not a big deal. At the beginning of what you're going to see online is how the packaging around language helps us understand language. See you back here in 2 weeks. Yay.